Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. We had an event maybe over 2 years ago on cannabis, and a lot has changed in that time. And we thought we should take another look at this interesting topic. And just to keep this short, I'm going to switch it over to Kirsten, who will introduce herself. She was moderated our previous event, and she'll introduce Gina. All right, thanks, Kristen.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I'm going to say hi and then go off camera because Zoom is misbehaving today. So if it glitches, I'll do that. But NYPAY, thank you so much. It was a delight to do this a couple of years ago. It was so much fun in person. Now there is so much that has changed. And part of that is financial services. We're finding partners, and partners we can trust, and partners that will help us navigate these roads and understand who the good players are in the cannabis related businesses, and kind of how to better understand how to work together. So I am delighted that I'm here with Gina Kranwinkle, who's the CEO of NACB. Look them up. They are the only cannabis association where they vet their members. And Gina has shared before, it's not just a check the box thing. What is it, Gina, like 30 or 40% of those who apply don't make it through?
Yeah, and that's also, just the ones who don't apply because they've looked at their checklist. It's very hard, and we do a really thorough check of, even financial backgrounds, regulations that they consistently are failing, etc. So. I think, Kirsten, are you there?
Yeah, I don't know how much of that came through. I'm just going to go off camera.
If you could repeat that again, Kirsten.
Yeah, sorry about that. So my background is fintech payments forever. And I don't know anybody cracking jokes about how long that is, but always at the cutting edge. Where's the market going? How do we bring traditional financial services into this new age? And so LinkedIn's up to date. Gina, do you want to share a little bit about yourself and kind of your interesting road to what you get to do now?
Yes. So, born and raised in New York. So hi, all the New Yorkers out there. I definitely understand the difficulties we've gone through just even to get, medicinal cannabis legislation and now finally recreational. So yay. I've taught at the City University of New York for over a decade now. Luckily, I was working in drugs and societies, one of the courses. So I teach health education and public health. I'm still in New York City, and it's been a long road. I was over 3 years ago, had the opportunity to join the National Association of Cannabis Businesses, where we work with industry experts to create standards around different issues that we see. Currently, we're working with EMC to do cash management. It's a huge issue. We've done advertising, we're done what to look like for billboards, social equity modeling. We really try to deal with the issues that are out there. We've done CBD products when there were no levels and guidance given, to really say what are the true standards that need to be implemented, and to really try to create some consensus across the different states right now. And we also try to provide education with our partners with Green Flower, and also with our weekly events that we have. We currently have a partnership with EMC doing Blazers and Blazers, and really bringing both industries and creating that bridge for everyone. And just overall, we feel that we advocate for the industry, what the industry needs, legalization on a state level, on a federal level. And you're really just glad to be here and, answer some of the questions that we have around banking, because we really need to create this industry. Because right now, the cannabis industry wants to do better. They want banking, they want investors, they want payment processing, but they're really limited because of this, criminalization on that federal level. So I think it's going to be a great discussion today.
Excellent. And Gina, so it's been a long road for us to get our two organizations together. And part of it was early on, we hadn't met you or NACB, and we'd go to these events, back into 2019. And if you said you were a banker or in payments, I mean, either they'd tell you how evil you were and they'd say, oh, do you know Joe in payments? Like what, we got 5 people in the industry. And they felt like we'd really, pardon the language, but we'd really screwed them over. So many of them said, look, I'm on my 3rd bank and you guys keep pulling the bank out from under me, or I'm on my 5th payment platform and why can't you guys get your act together? And then I asked them after they calmed down a little bit, well, tell me about your payment platform. And they described something that was the most ugly workaround you can possibly think of. And it would have been illegal, money laundering, or whatever they were doing. So one of the things that EMC and NACB have come together, EMC with the financial services members and experts, and NACB on the cannabis side, like Gina said, is to build this bridge between the two industries and to supply this objective, fact-based source of information and connectivity, kind of be an objective translator and an educator. One of the challenges that we've seen, and for those of you that I know all the way back to our days in prepaid, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of vilification out there. So the cannabis financial services industry is kind of where prepaid was, I don't know, 8 years ago, where you had misinformation out, there wasn't clear legislation or regulation. There was a lot of vilification. There's still people out there who think that what's the old TV or the movie that they used to show them in the 50s at school, Reefer Madness. There are people out there who think that Reefer Madness is a documentary, right? So we have a lot of information, misinformation to conquer. And one of the things we've said across both organizations is that in this industry, there's a flood of information, but a desert of facts. So we work together, primary research, surveys, all kinds of things. And we've got a new survey that's being released on cannabis banking. So just check out the EMC website and you can see more about that. But Gina, do you want to share a little bit about some of the things we're working on specifically together in our bridge?
Yeah, so currently we're working on cash management standards, which I think is just absolutely a necessity for not just the cannabis industry, but also the banking industry. I've gone to meetings from both standpoints. I've gone to meetings around cannabis, and they're saying, a lot of the people in the industry, especially when it first started, was, people who had never been in business to begin with. They might have just had to do self-budgeting for their families and nothing more. So now they jump into this world where compliance is at the top level, and they do not know what they need to do or how to do it. Not that they don't want to be compliant, but they need those guidelines. They need to be shown why is the bank requesting something instead of feeling like they're being interrogated. And what do they actually need to start keeping records of? Because, there were some cannabis companies out there, and there are still, who may not be keeping records because they weren't unsure of what they needed to keep. And so I think with the cash management standards that we're coming out with really gives a really great guideline to the reasonings behind it. What do I need to do? How can I safeguard the cash? How do we need to account for it? What are the ins and outs? But it also gives banks the standards that they need to about inquiring about. a lot, and I've been to conferences where we had some banks who said, oh, I'm not going to touch it. Or I would touch it, but I don't know how to start. I don't know. I haven't been given any standards on this. And so therefore I'm afraid of it. And we see that in a lot of the industry, there's a lack of standardization. So both parties don't really know what to do because they haven't been given the guidance in order to do it. So we're hoping that, we can make sure that the cannabis industry is in more compliance with these standards and it helps them, but also that it gives a template of standards for the banking industry to connect with and unite on. And on top of that, we're trying to create a glossary of terminology, because what we realize is that both industries are speaking different languages. And, how do we bring these two industries together? So as we started with our cash management standards, we realized we need to take a step further than what we're doing, which is why we started to create Blazers and Blazers, banking industry issues around cannabis, and coming with experts from cannabis, but also experts from banking, for them to really join forces and say, what are the key issues that you're having? And what does that mean? And to really build and connect that relationship together. Because as Christian said, cannabis industry thought that, you were harsh against them. Oftentimes they feel, why are you treating me as a criminal? And I know that from a banker standpoint, they don't understand that. They're like, we're not treating you like a criminal. We're mandated to have all this stuff. But remember, this is not unlike most industries. This is very much unlike their personal banking account. So their personal banking account, they sign up, they write checks, they have the money. If they have the money in the account, they really don't have any other issues. But now you're asking them for taxes and why did you make this transaction, and we're not going to limit this, and who are your partners, and we need to fill out this form and that form, and who you can't take credit cards, you can't take this. And so all we see on this other side is, because I'm in cannabis, you're putting all this compliance on me and you're interrogating me, instead of realizing that actually that's the protocol. And so we're not putting any more scrutiny on you. We have to adhere to all these different elements. So we're really trying to bring that together. And the glossary also helps so that there is a common language that is spoken, because a term in cannabis means something completely different in banking. And I know, Kristen, you have a really funny story about that.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask if you mind if I interject there, because we all know Money 2020 is coming up. And the last Money 2020 in person, I was at a breakfast and half the table was cannabis folks and the other half was banking. And I'm just drinking coffee, listening, and I can hear the voices get more and more animated, maybe is a good way to put it. And so I start listening more closely, and I'm bilingual, right? I speak cannabis and banking. So I'm sitting there listening and realizing exactly what Gina said. They were saying the same thing. And finally, I kind of knocked on the table and said, guys, wait, shush for just a minute. All right, that word in cannabis means the same word in banking. So you're both talking about compliance and transparency, but you're not using the same language. And the tone of the whole table just calmed down a bit. And that's one of the things, the word glossary, like nobody jumps up and down that's a fabulous thing, right? But it is really a translation tool. And you got to be bilingual in this industry. The other thing with glossary, back in our prepaid days, we created one, and it was the legislators, regulators, and law enforcement that asked for it first. So this is the hard work that nobody wants to do, but it helps everybody. And that's one of the cool pieces. And Gina, you were talking about sometimes the cannabis folks saying, look, why are you damn bankers so invasive, right? They're used to their personal account. That didn't ask them about beneficial owners and what's your taxes been for the last few years and where'd you get that money. And so it's been really good, Gina, getting to work with NACB, where we do our Blazers and Blazers, which, guys, by the way, is the third Thursday of each month. And we pick a topic and debate it, right? So we'll have somebody from EMC and somebody from NACB, And one of the topics has been getting ready to meet with your banker. And like Gina has explained, we'll have to say, look, you are not getting a special root canal. You're getting the same root canal that any other high risk business takes. So it again, this kind of translation ends up calming people down and lets us all converse in a way that's helpful, and you all get new business and they understand what they need to do to be ready for the meeting.
Yeah, and there are other elements that comes along with cannabis industry banking that most often it's really hard for them to get bank accounts because there's such a limit of banks that are willing to bank cannabis. You know, they can't go to Chase, they can't go to Wells Fargo, and they don't understand why. And they need bank accounts. You know, where are we going to store all of this money that's coming in? You know, we speak about, you know, this industry going to be hundreds of millions to then billions of dollars, and you want them to hold it all at their stores. You know, how do they pay their taxes? You know, because they can't give cash payments. And then you know, so it is. You know, if it was any other industry and they started to change all of those things on you, you would feel that you're being persecuted. And it is because on the federal level, because it is unconstitutional, you know, it's this, you know, Schedule I drug. There are ways that they need to go around. It's not as simple as saying, I can prove that I am compliant, so therefore I can get a bank account. Because there's a wait list at some banks to get an account. And, you know, coming from the industry, you just don't understand it. And you don't understand why, say a wealth management account, oh, it's, you know, it's $100 to pay my bills if I have a bakery. And now I'm paying $400 to $1,200 or even thousands of dollars at a different bank because I'm a cannabis industry. And these are the sort of the things that they deal with because we do not have a clear record, and there's no clear understanding from the banking industry that is coming out and saying, this is why it is so expensive. This is why it's so hard to get a bank account, you know, when we start talking about interstate commerce. And I think that we are doing a really good job for the industry on trying to really get that information out there so that the cannabis industry can really look at financing and banking in a different way.
So Gina, we've got some questions coming in and two things. So everybody that's on, we are going to get to the SAFE Act. And is that really a panacea anyway, we'll get to that and talking about descheduling at the federal level. Does that fix everything? What's come up is that one of the challenges for banks entering is the cost of compliance. And one of the things that has been really interesting, even go look at the EMC website, but you can see there are companies out there that were built by bankers and compliance people that are toolkits for the banks to use in their compliance efforts. And having spent a lot of time in the industry and with these banks as they enter, it's true, if you were going to do all this compliance on your own and file the required SARs and everything and be ready for your bank examiner all on your own with your existing tools, that is expensive and it's a head count. But there are tools out there that have been proven now for 3, 4, 5 years that have made it through a bank examination that do help the banks to be able to comply without adding all of those compliance folks. If anybody's going to be at Money 2020, we'll have a couple of more deep dive sessions. Cannabis is not on the main stage this year, 2019, and we were the opening keynote. This year it's not even on main stage because they had to cut so many back. But there will be a couple of pop-ups and deep dives. You'll see it on LinkedIn, on our website, but it is, the first one is Sunday from 4 to 6. The second one is Monday from 4 to 6. And then we'll be announcing pop-ups on different topics. So we'll just create our own darn content at Money 2020. So one of the questions, why is there a wait list? There's so few banks serving that oftentimes you have to wait to be able to be let in. The part of the misinformation that's out there is government many people in DC, because we just spoke at a big conference a couple weeks ago, think that the FinCEN report that says there's, I don't know, 531 banks that have filed SARs, people presume that that means there's 531 banks serving cannabis. That's not true. That's how many banks filed a SARs. A lot of those banks are accidentally banking cannabis. They're not doing it on purpose. And they have to file the SARs. That doesn't mean that they're actively in the industry. So there still is, some states have a lot more banks where it's available, and Colorado has more than others. But still there's a shortage, especially since so many states recently legalized. So there's a question about Canadian banks. Canadian banks are going to follow different rules. It's not federally illegal. Cannabis isn't federally illegal there. They do have some good alternative vehicles. Gina, do you want to share a little bit about, you talked about standards and the fact we're working on cash management, and payment standard is the next one that should be coming up after Money 2020. But the standards that you've already done, people can see that on the NACB website, but talk about the acceptance, and at the government level, investors, people are really looking at the standards and they're being well adopted.
Yeah, we do consulting with a number of state agencies as to what our standards are, or even other associations that are picking up, say, our billboard standards and other standards within the industry, but people also follow them. So we have self audits that all of our members do in order to comply. Right now, we're working with Vermont to help with recommendations for their adult use legislation and their medicinal industry as well. One of the biggest problems that I would really like to raise here for the industry is the miscommunication that people receive in the cannabis industry. I did see a question here about some of the misinformation and guidance that they get. There are some major banks out there that do, know your customer, and then tell them, oh, it's okay. And they'll be like, oh, it's okay that you're cannabis. And then they open a cannabis account and then they close it. And they get closed. And then they open another account and it gets closed. And, it needs to be on the banker to say, you're not allowed to bank cannabis. If you're cannabis touching affiliated with cannabis, that information needs to go out there. And I think it is responsibility for any banker to clearly give that information to a cannabis business and say, no, I cannot open your account. I've seen way too much about bank accounts being open and then closed. And then our next standard that we're doing with EMC is about payment processing, because this is the next major issue in cannabis. We've already seen these challenges where you have a payment process who promises you the world. Right now, cannabis touching plant cannabis industry cannot take credit cards. And that is a major problem because they have to deal with cash. They're always looking for alternate ways. And there is some way to get around it, but it is not by taking credit cards. I can tell you the number of companies who come in wanting a payment processor, and I ask them if they take any major credit cards, and then they say to me, oh, well, I have a special letter from Visa. They accept me. And I said, well, can I see this letter? Can I speak with Visa? Who's your contact there? It is not federally legal. It is not legal at this time for them to take it. And then I will be at conferences and the same thing will happen. You have at a conference a payment processor who is promising them that they can take their payments and it won't be a problem. And this is A-okay. And they have special authorization. And these are lies. We have some people going overseas and the money coming back or the money coming in saying that you're a restaurant when you're a dispensary. I know, Kirsten, you've seen the same thing. And it's really this miscommunication that is highly impacting the industry.
Yes, wow, we're getting some really good questions in here. I don't know that we're going to get to all of them, but SARS, suspicious activity report. Somebody asked what a SARS is. Let's see. How are the banks in states where cannabis is legal dealing with the federal risk issue? Talking to the banks that are banking are saying, look, we know that it's legal in our state. We are state licensed, and we are banking a properly licensed cannabis business all within the state. The trigger, as you all know, is when you interstate commerce, when you cross state lines, and then it is federally illegal. So the banks that are choosing to do that, it's a risk reward balance. They've got to make that decision. Is it worthwhile for them to take that risk? Many of the banks that are in cannabis are kind of secretly in cannabis, where if you know how to get to them, they'll bank, but they're not going to market that that's what they're doing. Some of them got into it kind of accidentally. Many of them are credit unions and community banks, and they had a customer, longtime customer that was already, they had commercial property and they were leasing to the pizza place and the hair shop or whatever, and a dispensary moves in. And so because of that long time relationship already with that customer, that bank is allowing the customer to have a dispensary on their site. Some of the questions that are coming up in here is they're probably going to be better when we have lawyers on the phone. I mean, I can act like one. Went to law school, but I'm not a practicing lawyer. So anything that we say here, actually, Gina, we forgot to do that at the beginning. We are not lawyers. This is not legal advice. We can share with you what we've learned from the industry and from being neck deep in this. So this is definitely not legal advice. One of the things that we've talked about is the SAFE Act. And David, I know you asked us to make sure that we bring that up. So there's some talk, some people are saying, hey, once that thing passes, woohoo, all the banks are jumping in, all the card networks are jumping in, life is great. It's not true. The way it is presently worded, it doesn't make it not a Schedule I. And if you look at the actual wording, and I know we've got payments geeks on the phone that can probably quote it, on the card networks, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover, that you cannot transact and something that's illegal on the platform. So as long as this is federally illegal, it's not going to work, or for any of the federal banks, as soon as it crosses state lines. So there's, in a number of meetings, actually this week with lobbyists on the Hill, the conjecture, we know that it's been added on to a bill that appears to be moving quickly, but then you've got folks like Schumer saying, look, we need it to be all inclusive. It needs to legalize and address banking, because we're only going to get one shot at cannabis this year before the 2022 elections. Gina, looks like you want to comment on that.
No, I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. So it's, I talked to the folks at the American Bankers Association, and I said, what? You guys are behind this, right? Like you're supporting SAFE, and most of your banks are federal. And he said, no, we're not supporting it. We're not opposing it. So it doesn't solve. Again, the pop-up meetings coming up at Money 2020, we'll have lawyers there, lobbyists there, so we can get more in depth on it. But it is a bit of a sticky wicket. And I know I've seen Michael Flores commenting on some of the questions here. One of the key risks with banks and for the cannabis financial services platforms that use banks, several of them have to have 5, 10, 15 banks, because as soon as bank A hits their concentration levels as a percent of their business for cannabis, they can't take anymore. And then that platform has to move to bank B, bank C, bank D, and then back around again. So just the accounting and compliance for those platforms, and they're built for it. They're built for the compliance, but it's a bit of a challenge. Gina?
It's definitely a challenge. And, I've spoken to a number of people about the SAFE Act, and, they said, yes, it gives me a larger umbrella of protection, but I still don't have any standards around this. And I don't know what I'm doing. The first thing to even look into when we're dealing with cannabis. And so people are really hesitant. I think, standards makes people feel protected. What do I need to review? What aspects do I need to look at? Especially, if you have a banker who has no idea about cannabis in the first place.
Well, the other thing, Gina, on that exact point, so going back to our past lives in a high-risk industry, and we created standards and best practices and checklists, and the regulators and the examiners said, oh, isn't that nice? The industry created them, right? And they were gracious, but they said, that this is nice, that's great. And then one of our members came out after an examination and said, there was a checklist in the examination. Looked an awful lot like the one that we all built in this industry effort. So even when it looks like nobody's listening, sometimes they're listening. And so we just keep trying to do the right thing.
Agreed. I know someone just mentioned some payment processing. That is, I think, one of the biggest issues in the industry right now. And they need this help. They need the protection. Ease Delivery Company just got really badly hit with a lawsuit, which the company actually did plead guilty of wire and fraud because they were processing, debit cards and credit cards. I think they had over $100 million in transactions. And, two of their consultants went to prison. One for, 2.5 years, another, I believe it was 15 years. They got hit with some fines, and they could have gone to prison for life. What we're forgetting right now is that these are easy ways for the feds to go after them. These are paper trails that are left. And I'm afraid if, companies in the industry are using the incorrect payment processor, it is not only the head administrators who might have known what was going on, because some of them are not that knowledgeable. The payment processor said, oh, we're doing everything clean. This is how you do it. Now they bring in cashless ATMs, which just makes me so worried. And it is not only the company that will get fined, the payment processing company or the dispensary or cultivator, anyone who's using it. But it is also, the bud tender who rang up the charge that can be held responsible for this. To a payment processor that you found to be safe when they weren't.
Gina, exactly what you're saying is what led to, we had proposed for our two organizations for us to speak at MJ BizCon, which is the week right before Money 2020, and it's the Money 2020 of cannabis, right? And the topic was orange is the new black. Like if you get this money stuff wrong, because we've had people who run cannabis businesses saying, big deal. So the payment platform leaves and I've got a new one. What's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal, right? Like Gina said, the Ease case pointed out. And the Ease case was interesting because Ease was turned in by its competitors. So it's interesting in this industry. On the payments standards coming up, just to share, helping to lead that initiative is going to be a couple of top payments lawyers in the US. Those of you who are involved in prepaid and other high risk before, Canel Gates is going to be one of the law firms participating, and Judy Ranierson and Linda Odom are going to be participating in that. So yes, there'll be a lot of listening going on. There's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of innovation that works in payments. There's some that doesn't. And that will be, we can have all of our discussions on innovation, but we felt that having a couple of the top payments lawyers in the US on that committee to say, love the innovation, guys, and you can choose to do it. That is your choice. But just know that here's the challenges that you may have. And that, of course, I'll always say, go talk to your own lawyers, right? But we thought it was wise to have that counsel.
I know we've had some questions about, you know, cashless ATMs, and I know we've had this with a lot of your members about this topic, about, you know, someone coming in and bringing up that it's an ATM charge and giving money back, and it being coded differently than actual ATM. You know, about ATMs when they're actually getting products for it.
Gina, that brings up a topic, and one of the things, as we're actually putting together an educate platform that will be for cannabis related businesses, investors, banks and fintechs, government, that'll just be this fact-based set of classes, videos, checklists, how-tos for this industry.
Do you want to go into more depth about cashless ATM? I know that was one of the questions that was in the chat.
We can, if you'd like. Oh, I know. Let me finish the thought though on the cannabis businesses that come to us and say, how can we tell that this is a good payment platform? Give us a checklist. And one of the things that we've shared, and you guys know this, right? But it's been helpful to share with the cannabis industry that take a look at your statement. Does it have your name on it? Like, is it your business, ABC Cannabis, or does it say health and wellness studio or supplement warehouse or whatever? Is your merchant acquirer misrepresenting who you are? And Gina, I know you've seen that a bunch.
Yeah. Even, you know, them misrepresenting themselves as banks and having, you know, protection by the federal government of someone opening up a bank account and saying to them, we can take legacy money, and then somehow they're being insured by a bank, you know, in another country, and their transactions being named something else. I mean, I've just seen everything, you know, there are people, you know, who come and try to make all these promises. And the best thing that I can always tell people in the industry is to say, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. If it's going to solve every single issue you have, I would, you know, definitely take a deeper dive into them.
I know, Gina, I've heard the stories of you at MJ Biz and some of the others just walking on up to the payments people and saying, so who's the bank behind this? Or how are you taking Visa, MasterCard? And some of the stories you've told about, well, I have a special letter from the CEO of Visa that gives me an exception to the rule. Or I've got a special letter from the banking regulator. Well, which one? Which bank? And I hear you've just been tearing them up.
Yeah, I am. It's definitely really hard for me at some conferences when I see these payment processing companies, and you know, they're just doing things wrong. So I said, okay, well, if I do a credit card charge with you, what's the name that you're going to put on the account? Oh, well, we're just going to say you're a restaurant, but that's okay. Don't worry, that's fine. No, it's not fine. And you'll be surprised that there are definitely, you know, instances in the industry right now where I'll be paying if we need to pay for something and it comes up as somewhere completely different. Or, you know, someone takes a credit card, a major credit card, went to buy product for something. And I understand that the hardships that the industry goes through because they don't have another choice. but, I'm saying that it's really so important. And, I say to payment processors, if you're not doing this legally and you're not doing this right, and maybe you don't know, but you need to go to your business owners and say, this is not correct. And it's beyond just a gray area. There is very, very clear. There's black and white. This is what you're allowed to do. This is not what you're allowed to do. And you're scamming people. And I've had a number of my executives just be like, just walk away. It's okay. It's okay. But it really isn't okay. And when you go to a conference, you want to make sure that every booth there is reliable and responsible, and that you're not going to get caught into a situation because you valued the reputation of that conference. That's what we do such high vetting processes at NACB, because we want you to know that all of our members are people who are reliable and trustworthy, that they're doing the right thing. And sometimes it's really tough because people come into the market and want to, align themselves and make all this money and may not be doing things the right way in order to get there. And so, we just have to look out for it, because most businesses, I'm going to say, they don't know what is doing wrong. They think, well, they said I could use my credit card. I didn't know that I couldn't use it. Oh, they're doing it right. Because some people are doing it right. We've talked about, if you are a member in a dispensary and setting up an ACH process, that they can do that. So we just have to just keep on trying to promote the good players out there.
And guys, I've got an example of a translation here. So in cannabis language, payment processor is anybody that is the front side selling you payment services, where in fintech and payment speak, the payment processor, so they're essentially, we would call them sub ISOs, right? Resell. So that's one of the reasons it takes a while for the acquiring bank to figure out that a merchant 6 layers through the sub ISO is not who they say they are. So sometimes these payment platforms, they'll be available for 90 days because it takes that long for that merchant or the merchant acquirer to figure it out.
Yeah. I would love to maybe take some live questions if anybody, certainly has questions for us or specific questions about the cannabis industry.
Gina, a couple things. David is asking, so are you saying this is a cash business for the foreseeable future? It's not. There are ways to process this within a state, using the ACH networks, use a closed loop card, as long as the transaction stays in a legal state, the bank is licensed, the properly licensed cannabis business. It's when it's crossing the state lines that you've got the challenges. Gina, before we take live questions, because we're literally taking them live out of the chat, EMC finished, and you guys helped a lot, I know, Gina, and getting some cannabis folks to reply as well, on current banking in cannabis. David True, would you mind if we took 5 to 7 minutes? We've got Michael Flores on Zoom, who led that as Bretton Woods for us. And it's, Michael, I don't think we have time to go through in depth, but I know you're doing a webinar, the 15th? Anyway, David, is that okay with you?
Yeah, please do. We've
Okay.
got a little more time.
Okay, Michael.
Okay, share the screen real quick.
And guys, there's tons of material in here, but Michael, if you can keep it to 5 to 7 minutes, that would be fabulous.
I will do my best.
Just a big thank you to Michael Flores and Ashley Eisner, who's also on the call with us today, who has really helped to create these cash management standards along with other EMC members.
Many hours.
Many hours.
More than
So
welcome.
see who else is on.
Let's go through this quickly. The methodology, we designed a 28 question survey that went to financial institutions, credit unions, and banks. I had an initial circulation to my contacts, clients. We then offered a secondary circulation through Bankers Hub and its client base. And many of you who are bankers out there will know of Bankers Hub and their education services. Technically, while the number of responders didn't qualify for statistical validity, I will tell you, I think we have enough geographic dispersion and charter type dispersion to glean areas of interest for further analysis and study. So going with that, by asset size, the majority were under $1 billion in assets, and 24% were 1 to 5 billion. So obviously it's the community banks that are showing the interest in this. And I think we all know the majors aren't going to touch this until there's federal legalization. Now, that said, you know, the majors represent 80% of the retail banking in this country. So you've got 5 to 10 banks that have the majority of all the business. But it's the community banks and the credit unions that are really going to be able to help service these customers, particularly in states where it's legal. By institution type, we had 46% that were state chartered, 24% national banks, and 21% credit unions, a smattering of CDFIs, community development financial institutions. 19% of the respondents actually provide one or more services to marijuana-related businesses or cannabis-related businesses. The geographic dispersion is, you might guess, you're going to have more in the Pacific area, less in the Southeast and the Southwest. We can send you this survey if you want to give us your email addresses, or certainly attend our webinar on the 15th. Plus, we're going to have it available on the EMC website.
Yeah, Michael, at the bottom of the EMC website, there's a contact us. Put it in there if this is something you'd like, please.
Okay. Key findings, 7 areas. The bankers who told us who are doing it, and the ones who are thinking about it but have not pulled the trigger yet, are saying banking hemp and CBD is a great start before you get into medical and recreational product. Training, and this goes back to this disconnect on vocabulary, on culture. You couldn't get two more disparate cultures between bankers and marijuana growers or sellers. So you need to have a sales team and a frontline organization that understands cannabis business. And I've done this in many other industries, high-risk industries. Is it easier to take a banker and train them in the cannabis industry, or is it better to take somebody who's familiar with cannabis businesses and provide banking backup to support that person? I tend to think the latter. Obviously, from an industry standpoint, the experience is lacking. Key concern is still medical versus recreational. I think boards are more comfortable with medical at this point in time, but as more states legalize recreational and have their commissions in place to propagate regulations, I think the banks will have a better feel for if they want to get into the recreational side of it. Overall, we found and reported back good satisfaction with the cannabis programs, limited as they may be. And you know, the hurdles are going to be working with the EMRBs in the future. And obviously, from the bank's perspective, it's going to be the level of due diligence that's required before you can onboard a company, and the ongoing compliance. And that's why the fees are so high. If you do get an account, the fees are significant. Now, there are services out there and technologies is coming in place to help streamline the risk management and compliance. But it's still understandably a high expense area for the bank. And finally, and that's what we're trying to do with EMC Educate, is provide that fact-based, that database education from qualified people in the industry, both from the banking side and the cannabis side, to provide the information that's needed so that people, the bankers, one, can understand what the cannabis industry is all about, and cannabis people really can understand, why do I need to do what I need to do to get a bank account? What are the things that I need to do so that I don't have to keep on going back and giving things to the banker? And I think one of the points being is that, particularly for the banks, even if you're not offering services yet, get ahead of the curve, create the business plan now, target the market you want. Where in the supply chain do you want? Do you want to be a cultivator, a grower, or a dispensary, and bank those people? But have all the analysis in place, understand who your competition is going to be, how you're going to price that service, and then have it on the shelf. So when it is descheduled, then you can hit the road running, or at least go to your board and say, here's how we want to do this, and here's the risk. Are you in or are you out? And if you're in, bam, you can hit the road running with this thing. Again, as you can expect, we've had the majority have been operating less than 5 years, a significant amount under 2 years in the business. Those that are, working at adult versus medical, almost 44% are focusing on medical. 31% said it's recreational use, and then we had 25% are no reply. And those are probably the ones that aren't in the business yet and haven't decided which side to go into it. Here's a quick breakdown of the services offered. The majority is checking, obviously, a DDA account, followed by cash management services, ATM card, and on down the line. Obviously, lending at this point in time is lagging until there's clarification on the legality. You don't want to do a commercial real estate loan and have your customers shut down because they're breaking some sort of law or regulation along the way. And what are the primary hurdles working with them? For those institutions that came back who do not currently bank cannabis businesses, their concerns were the following: obviously the illegality, the compliance challenges, the board objections. A lot of these banks, community banks in particular, are going to have a lot of old line conservative people on their board that is going to be a tough sell for them. It's easing up a little bit, and anecdotally, I can tell you I had a client in an agricultural area in the state of Georgia, which is known for growing onions. And they said, we're not doing it right now, but if it becomes legal, we would really want to look at offering the services because we need to have other crops in our area, and our farmers need other crops in the area. So as conservative as that area is, I think you're starting to see some softening of attitudes as they're going along. And of course, you can look at the rest. Go ahead.
So Vidalia buds, I guess, instead of Vidalia onions, right?
Yes, that's it. Vidalia, absolutely. Institutions that do bank cannabis, what are their concerns? Competition. People are going to see the money that's involved. Those that are deposit poor can see the value in bringing in all these deposits. The fees that can be generated from these businesses. They're still going to be looking at what regulations will be promulgated at the federal level, and as well as the state level. Each state who's legalized it are promulgating their own set of regulations, and no state matches another state. Believe me, it's like money services businesses, individually licenses, and each one is different. Determining medicinal versus recreational, and obviously cash flow management, so on and so forth. So, that's in a snapshot. There are a lot of other categories that we didn't cover. The with those 28 questions that we'll be coming out with. But I think it's interesting to see that, and my big takeaway from this was, yeah, we're interested. We really got to understand the risk, the reputational risk on our side, but we're willing to take a look. And I think those that prepare their business plan ahead of time will be the winners. Any questions? I know we went through it fairly quickly, but I was given a timeline.
So David, are we done in 2 minutes?
We can, if we run it along, that's fine. If there's other questions to take, but
Okay.
take as many questions as you've got, and then we can wrap it up.
Okay, yeah, we didn't want to be disrespectful of people's time. So guys, if there are questions we don't get to, or you'd like more on the survey, we are going to do the survey. We talked about doing it annually, but this market is moving so fast. It's probably, Michael, what do you think? Twice a year? I know that's volunteering you for it, so maybe you should just go hide somewhere.
No, I think that is good because it is moving quickly, and as we see each state mature in their regulatory environment, we'll see different issues arise, and we need to surface those issues.
Okay. So I'm going to answer one of the questions that's in the chat here, and then if there are live questions that are something brief we can answer here. If it's a longer question, go to the bottom of the EMC website and pose the question here and there, and Gina and I can work together to get back to you. So somebody had asked, what if banking is or if cannabis is descheduled at the federal level? Does that solve everything? Well, it's still a high risk. You guys know this, right? It's still a high risk industry. So you don't see thousands and thousands of banks serving gambling or some of the other things that are, you know, liquor stores, right? It would still be a managed risk. It takes away the Schedule 1 risk, but it's still, as we talk to the cannabis folks, and Gina, maybe you've got a way in here, that the impression that if it's descheduled, now there's going to be 4,000 banks that jump in wholeheartedly immediately, but that's just not the way it works with high risk.
Well, that's exactly what we think as an industry. Of course we do. No, I certainly know the realities, and I think that there are some players, but you know, our biggest hope is right now, and I think that this is something that you and I are doing, is to try to give the resources and material to banks now so that they can really start understanding what the cannabis industry is about and how they can prepare themselves for federal legalization. Because with the barriers that the industry is facing right now, we can't go through this for many more years. I mean, it's so expensive for the industry, you know, just resources. And as we explained before, the barriers that they face could jeopardize their entire company and or their employees. So, you know, we need to step up to the plate and start doing something about it now. We don't have the luxury of time, really.
Well, especially as things are legalizing. So live questions, are there folks that want to pose a question that maybe aren't in the chat already?
Well, it was great to meet everybody today. I'm going to put my email in the chat box if anyone wants to find out more about NACB or have, you know, any direct questions for myself. It's been really enjoyable, and, you know, Kirsten and I and our, you know, EMC and NACB, we're just trying to push forward and, you know, try to really create a consensus and, you know, build a bridge between finance and cannabis.
I want to thank you very much, Gina and Kirsten and Michael, for all the information you've conveyed tonight. And I wish you guys all a very good evening. Or are you still in New Zealand, Gina?
I am. So tomorrow exists. It is midday for me on Wednesday.
So have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank Thanks, David, and NYPAY.
Okay.
This was fabulous.
Okay. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.